From the soaring spires of ancient cathedrals to the shadowed corridors of crumbling castles, history whispers secrets few are allowed to hear. On the surface, royal families have always been symbols of elegance, grandeur, and unquestioned authority. Portraits in gilded frames show kings and queens adorned in silk and gold, holding scepters that symbolize power granted by divine decree. Yet beneath this glittering veneer lies a far darker, more intricate narrative, one of hidden bloodlines, erased heirs, and knowledge that has been guarded, manipulated, and suppressed for centuries. The story of royalty is not merely one of crowns and kingdoms. It is a story of secret knowledge, silent wars, and the hidden threads that bind certain families across generations. What if the history you were taught in school, the history that appears in textbooks and documentaries, is only a polished fragment of the truth? What if the true narrative of royal power has been deliberately concealed, rewritten, and sanitized over the ages? Consider for a moment this striking pattern of European monarchies. Dynasties rise and fall, seemingly at random, yet subtle connections hint at something far more deliberate. Names reappear across centuries. Secret marriages form alliances invisible to the public eye, and entire lines of potential heirs vanish from records, as if history itself has been carefully edited. These anomalies are not simply coincidences or errors of chroniclers. They are pieces of a vast, hidden puzzle, one that stretches from the earliest kingdoms of Europe to the present day. While scholars and historians often dismiss these threads as myth or legend, countless whispers in dusty archives, forbidden manuscripts, and secretive libraries suggest otherwise. The very concept of divine right, the idea that a king or queen rules by mandate of God, may itself be a veil carefully constructed to obscure a more esoteric truth. Some historians and occult scholars argue that certain bloodlines carry with them knowledge, power, and influence that transcends politics, linking them to forgotten rituals, ancient prophecies, and even mystical practices. The Merovingians of France, often dismissed as obscure or irrelevant by mainstream history, are whispered to possess a lineage intertwined with sacred knowledge, a bloodline so potent that it threatened other dynasties enough to be systematically erased from memory. The threads of power run deeper than crowns and titles. They're embedded in the very DNA of those chosen to inherit them. The intrigue grows when one examines the role of secret societies and clandestine orders. The Knights Templar, the Freemasons, and the Rosicrucians are often reduced in popular culture to myths or romanticized legends. Yet there is compelling evidence suggesting that these groups did far more than guard relics or perform rituals. They served as custodians of hidden truths, protectors of lineages, and sometimes as shadow advisors to monarchs who outwardly appeared all-powerful, yet privately relied on guidance from those who understood the deeper forces at play. To the untrained eye, history appears linear and comprehensible, a tidy record of kings, queens, wars, and treaties. To those willing to peer beyond the veil, history becomes an intricate web of suppression, selective storytelling, and deliberate concealment. Even the most celebrated events in European history take on a different light when viewed through this lens. Battles that seemed decisive, successions that appeared uncontested, and dynasties that supposedly faded into obscurity may have been carefully orchestrated to hide the existence of certain heirs, prevent the dissemination of secret knowledge, or eliminate potential threats to an established bloodline. The disappearance of heirs, mysterious deaths of monarchs, and sudden changes in succession are not merely tragic accidents. They are clues in a narrative that mainstream history has struggled to acknowledge. As this documentary unfolds, we will travel through centuries of concealed histories, uncovering the hidden alliances and secret rivalries that shaped the world from behind closed doors. We will follow the trail of bloodlines erased from public memory, explore artifacts that whisper of concealed truths, and examine prophecies that suggest some rulers were guided not just by chance, but by a knowledge preserved through generations. Each revelation will bring us closer to understanding the clandestine forces that have shaped the course of history, challenging everything we believe about power, legitimacy, and the very notion of inheritance. By the end of this journey, the story of royalty will no longer be a tale of pomp and ceremony. It will be a story of secrecy and survival, of knowledge passed down in shadows, and of a hidden thread that connects the past to the present in ways that are both shocking and profound. The history you thought you knew is only the beginning. The truth, long buried and carefully guarded, waits to be revealed. The story of human civilization is inseparable from the story of bloodlines, and nowhere is this more evident than in the annals of royalty. From the earliest city-states and tribal kingdoms to the sprawling empires of Europe, certain families have maintained influence across generations, not merely through conquest or wealth, but through blood itself. Dynasties rose and fell, yet some names, Merovingian, Cape Town, Habsburg, reappear across centuries, suggesting a continuity that defies mere coincidence. These families were not simply political players. They were custodians of a hidden power, entrusted with knowledge and authority that extended far beyond the throne or the battlefield. The idea of inherited influence, of power encoded in blood, is central to understanding the hidden history of rulers. In the ancient world, the concept of dynastic succession was often intertwined with divine sanction. Pharaohs of Egypt were considered gods incarnate, their blood sacred, and their offspring destined to inherit both temporal and spiritual authority. Similarly, Mesopotamian kings claimed descent from the gods themselves, and their genealogies were meticulously recorded to ensure legitimacy. Across continents and centuries, the pattern is remarkably consistent. Societies that venerate bloodlines elevate those who carry the right lineage, often masking political expediency as divine right. These early examples suggest that what we think of as monarchy is more than governance. It is a deliberate system of control, grounded in the idea that power is not merely earned but inherited. As Europe emerged from the chaos of the early medieval period, bloodlines became the currency of stability. Nobility, marriage alliances, and interwoven family ties created a complex network of influence that could span nations. The Merovingian dynasty, often shrouded in myth, illustrates this vividly. According to legend, they claimed descent from a semi-divine lineage, a bloodline so significant that it inspired both reverence and fear. Whether or not these claims are historically verifiable, the fact that they endured in secret traditions, obscure texts, and occult circles suggests there was something extraordinary about these rulers, something worth protecting, and something worth erasing when threatened. The concept of bloodlines was not confined to Europe. In Asia, the imperial dynasties of China, Japan, and India maintained meticulous genealogical records, often linking rulers to celestial or semi-divine ancestors. These records were not merely ceremonial. They reinforced a structure of power that allowed empires to endure, while subtly ensuring that the knowledge, rituals, and privileges of rulership remained within certain families. The control over bloodlines was control over destiny itself, a mechanism that ensured power and knowledge did not leak into the hands of outsiders. Medieval Europe, with its tangled web of kingdoms and duchies, provides the clearest example of how bloodlines were used strategically. Royal marriages were rarely about love or preference. They were instruments of alliance, conquest, and survival. The union of two dynasties often served a dual purpose, consolidating political power and preserving a sacred or esoteric lineage. Hidden within these unions may have been knowledge, symbols, and rituals transmitted quietly from generation to generation. The public face of monarchy, parades, coronations, and diplomacy, was only a fragment of the true story. Behind the closed doors of palaces and monasteries, lineages were protected, secrets were guarded, and history was quietly rewritten to favor those deemed worthy of inheritance. The strategic use of bloodlines extended to war, succession crises, and even assassination. Heirs who did not fit the pattern, or whose claim threatened an established lineage, often disappeared from historical records, their stories carefully excised. This erasure was not merely about consolidating power. It was about preserving a certain continuity, a thread of influence that could withstand the chaos of politics and rebellion. When viewed through this lens, the seemingly random shifts in European monarchies appear far more deliberate, almost as if guided by a hidden hand that understood the importance of who carried the blood and who did not. The fascination with bloodlines also intersected with the mystical. Alchemists, astrologers, and occult practitioners often maintained connections with ruling families, offering guidance based on the belief that certain lineages were imbued with extraordinary potential. Kings and queens consulted seers, not only about political decisions, but about spiritual or hereditary destiny. This secret knowledge, though rarely acknowledged in mainstream histories, reinforces the idea that bloodlines were more than political instruments. They were vessels of something deeper, something intentionally shielded from public view. Even as modern nation-states emerged and monarchies began to lose political power, the significance of bloodlines did not vanish. The careful intermarriage of aristocratic families, the quiet preservation of genealogical records, and the lingering influence of secret societies suggest that the guardianship of these lineages continues, even today. What appears as ceremonial or symbolic may, in fact, be the last vestiges of an ancient system designed to maintain control across generations. The rise and fall of kingdoms may be the surface of history, but the currents below, hidden and enduring, are shaped by the bloodlines that survived every upheaval, every war, and every revolution. By tracing these threads through time, one begins to see a pattern that challenges conventional narratives. Dynasties do not simply rise and fall. They persist, adapt, and protect certain knowledge, carefully passing it from generation to generation. These families, often obscured in legend or whispered about in secret manuscripts, represent the hidden continuity of power, a force that has quietly shaped the destiny of nations. Understanding these bloodlines is key to unraveling the deeper history that lies beneath the textbooks, the monuments, and the public ceremonies, a history that is as much about survival and secrecy as it is about crowns and thrones. Throughout history, myths and legends have served as more than entertainment or moral instruction. They have been powerful tools of legitimization. For rulers, claiming descent from gods, heroes, or mystical figures was not mere fantasy. It was a calculated strategy to consolidate authority and shield bloodlines from scrutiny. Across civilizations, sacred stories intertwined with genealogy, creating a narrative in which rulers were not just leaders, but living embodiments of divine will. The Merovingians, for example, were said to descend from a figure known as the divine serpent, a mystical origin story that elevated their status above ordinary kings. While skeptics dismiss such tales as folklore, their persistent presence in occult texts, religious manuscripts, and secretive circles suggests that these myths were carefully preserved to conceal a deeper truth. Certain bloodlines were considered inherently powerful and potentially dangerous if revealed. In medieval Europe, the concept of sacred lineage was reinforced through symbols, rituals, and religious ceremonies. Coronations were not merely formalities. They were acts of consecration, designed to link a ruler to divine authority. Kings were anointed with holy oils, crowned with sacred regalia, and publicly blessed by religious leaders who wielded both spiritual and political influence. Yet behind these grand ceremonies lay hidden layers of meaning. The true significance of lineage, the transmission of esoteric knowledge, and the secrets of dynastic continuity were rarely spoken aloud. These rituals were codes, signaling to insiders which families were custodians of power and which were mere pretenders to the throne. Legends of sacred blood were not confined to Europe. In Japan, the imperial family traces its lineage to Amaterasu, the sun goddess, establishing a claim to authority that transcends human history. In India, dynasties often claimed descent from celestial beings, linking their right to rule with divine sanction. These examples reveal a universal pattern. societies across the globe have consistently invested extraordinary bloodlines with legitimacy, often cloaking these truths in myth to protect the knowledge from outsiders. Such myths were not only political tools, they were guardians of hidden wisdom, embedding secrets within stories that could be understood only by those initiated into their mysteries. The Holy Grail, perhaps the most famous esoteric symbol associated with European royalty, offers a particularly striking example. For centuries, it has been depicted as a mystical object capable of granting eternal life, spiritual enlightenment, or divine favor. Some scholars suggest that the Grail legend was more than a tale of Christian relics. It was a symbolic record of a hidden bloodline, one whose lineage carried extraordinary significance. According to certain theories, the Grail was not a chalice at all, but a metaphor for a preserved line of descent, carefully protected and concealed from the public eye. If true, the stories that have inspired centuries of knights, crusaders, and scholars were less about faith and more about secrecy, a coded history of blood and power. Prophecies, too, were central to this sacred framework. From the Sibyls of Rome to Nostradamus in Renaissance France, foretelling the rise and fall of rulers was not merely a literary pastime. Prophecies often served as both warning and protection, guiding those in power while masking the true continuity of bloodlines. A ruler could claim divine insight or predestined authority, while in reality, the prophecy reinforced the idea that certain families were destined to maintain control. The interplay of myth and prophecy created a layered narrative, one story for the masses, and another hidden story for those who understood the true power of lineage. Art and architecture further concealed these messages. Illuminated manuscripts, cathedral carvings, and even the positioning of castles encoded symbols that reflected the sacred origins of rulers. Hidden in plain sight, these clues were intelligible only to the initiated, the clergy, secret societies, and select members of royal courts who understood the language of symbols. Paintings of kings and queens often included subtle motifs hinting at ancestral connections, mystical knowledge, or esoteric affiliations. What appeared as decorative flourish to the casual observer was, in reality, a carefully maintained record of legitimacy and secret inheritance. Yet myths were not static. They evolved, adapted, and occasionally were manipulated to serve political ends. The rewriting of legends, the erasure of inconvenient ancestors, and the selective amplification of sacred narratives ensured that the narrative of legitimacy remained intact. Bloodlines considered dangerous were omitted or demonized, while favored dynasties were elevated to near-mythical status. Over time, the line between history and legend blurred, making it increasingly difficult to distinguish fact from fiction. This deliberate intertwining of myth and reality ensured that hidden knowledge remained protected, accessible only to those who could read the symbols, understand the prophecies, and trace the sacred lineages. By examining these sacred origins, it becomes clear that history, legend, and esoteric knowledge were never separate domains. They functioned as a single, interwoven strategy to preserve power. Myths legitimized rulers, concealed forbidden knowledge, and guided the succession of bloodlines across generations. The narrative of kings and queens was carefully curated. What the public saw was pageantry and piety, while what insiders knew was lineage, legacy, and secret authority. This duality, public versus hidden truth, is a central theme of royal history and a key to understanding why certain families retained power for centuries, even when their dominance seemed precarious or inexplicable. As we continue our exploration, the interplay of myth, prophecy, and bloodline will become increasingly apparent. Legends are not just stories. They are maps, keys, and warnings. They are evidence that the hidden thread of power is older and deeper than any recorded history, and that the families who carried it understood the importance of secrecy, symbolism, and sacred narrative. To unravel the truth of royal bloodlines, one must not only study chronicles and genealogies, but also the myths that framed them. For within these tales lies a coded history, waiting to be deciphered by those who dare to look beyond the surface. From the dimly lit corridors of medieval castles to the vaulted halls of monasteries, history is filled with whispers of secretive groups that influence the destiny of kings and queens. These societies, the Knights Templar, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, and other lesser-known orders, have long been shrouded in myth, dismissed by mainstream historians as romanticized legends. Yet a closer examination reveals patterns too consistent to be mere coincidence. These groups often intersected with royal families, not as servants or subjects, but as custodians of knowledge and power that transcended the political sphere. Their influence was subtle, hidden beneath layers of ceremony and tradition, but it was undeniable. The Knights Templar, founded in the early 12th century, are among the most famous examples. Ostensibly a religious military order charged with protecting Christian pilgrims, the Templars accumulated immense wealth, knowledge, and influence. They established networks across Europe and the Holy Land, operated banks, and maintained records of properties and lineages. Some historians argue that their greatest treasure was not gold, but information, genealogical records, esoteric knowledge, and maps of hidden or sacred sites. It is within these records that the Templars may have preserved details about royal bloodlines that the public was never meant to know. Their sudden downfall in the early 14th century, orchestrated by monarchs and the church alike, was not simply a political purge. It was a calculated move to seize knowledge, control power, and erase evidence that could challenge existing dynasties. The Freemasons, often portrayed in popular culture as a secret fraternity of ritual and symbols, also maintained profound connections to royalty. Many European monarchs were either members or closely associated with Masonic lodges, which functioned as hubs of philosophical discourse, mystical study, and covert networking. Through rituals and coded symbols, knowledge about lineage, esoteric teachings, and even political strategy was transmitted discreetly. These lodges were more than social clubs. They were centers of influence, where information could be shared among the elite without public scrutiny. To the outside world, kings appeared sovereign and omnipotent, but behind closed doors, secret societies provided guidance, protection, and sometimes subtle correction to ensure that certain bloodlines remained unchallenged. The Rosicrucians, emerging during the Renaissance, are another example of this hidden intersection between esoteric knowledge and royalty. They claimed access to ancient wisdom, mystical science, and spiritual insights that could guide rulers toward enlightenment, prosperity, and longevity. Their teachings, often encoded in texts filled with symbolism and allegory, were not intended for public consumption. Initiates were required to decipher the meanings hidden in arcane manuscripts, often receiving knowledge that enhanced their understanding of lineage, destiny, and power. The Rosicrucians' influence over European courts was indirect but profound. Their philosophy encouraged rulers to view themselves not just as political leaders, but as custodians of sacred knowledge, responsible for preserving and transmitting it through their bloodlines. It is impossible to overlook the consistent pattern. Secret societies appear at moments of royal vulnerability, upheaval, or transition. During periods of disputed succession, wars of inheritance, or dynastic crisis, these groups often emerge as invisible arbiters, quietly guiding decisions, protecting heirs, or safeguarding secrets that could destabilize kingdoms if revealed. Their members, whether noble or clerical, wealthy or scholarly, acted as intermediaries between the visible authority of the throne and the hidden authority of esoteric knowledge. In effect, they were the silent guardians of a continuity that mainstream history rarely acknowledges. The influence of secret societies extended beyond Europe. In Asia, ritualistic and esoteric traditions intertwined with imperial courts, guiding decisions of succession and consolidating power. In India, for instance, certain secret brotherhoods advised rulers on spiritual and dynastic matters, ensuring that sacred knowledge remained concentrated within specific lineages. The universality of this phenomenon, across continents, cultures, and eras, suggests a deliberate, enduring strategy. Those in power often relied on hidden networks to maintain control, transmit knowledge, and protect bloodlines from interference or exposure. Symbols, rituals, and coded language were essential tools for these societies. Heraldry, cryptic manuscripts, architectural motifs, and ceremonial rites conveyed messages intelligible only to the initiated. Kings and queens who participated in these rituals were not merely showing piety or following tradition. They were actively engaging in a system designed to preserve esoteric knowledge and protect dynastic secrets. To outsiders, these ceremonies appeared ceremonial or ceremonialized power. To insiders, they were integral to the survival and legitimacy of royal bloodlines. Even the downfall of these societies often served the same purpose: consolidation of hidden knowledge under tighter control. When the Templars were disbanded, much of their wealth, documents, and secrets were absorbed by monarchs or the church. When certain Masonic lodges were suppressed or censored, the transmission of their teachings became more secretive, reserved only for the most trusted insiders. These events were not random acts of repression. They were strategic efforts to ensure that the most sensitive knowledge remained concentrated within approved bloodlines and trusted networks. The consequences of this hidden interplay between royalty and secret societies are profound. History, as presented in textbooks, chronicles the reigns of kings and queens, battles fought, and treaties signed. But beneath these surface events exists a parallel narrative, one where knowledge, lineage, and influence are carefully guarded by societies operating beyond the public eye. Understanding these connections allows us to see patterns that might otherwise appear coincidental: sudden shifts in succession, unexpected alliances, and the survival of certain families through centuries of turmoil. Ultimately, secret societies were not merely curious footnotes in the story of power. They were integral to its very structure. By guiding rulers, protecting heirs, and controlling the flow of esoteric knowledge, these groups ensured that certain bloodlines endured, even when history seemed to erase them. They are the invisible architects of continuity, shaping the past, steering the present, and perhaps influencing the future in ways that most people will never perceive. To unravel the true story of royal bloodlines, one must recognize the hidden hand of these societies, the invisible networks that linked rulers to knowledge far older than the kingdoms they governed. The public might see a crown and a throne, but the full picture reveals a web of secrecy, ritual, and power, a web that has ensured the survival of certain bloodlines for centuries, often at the expense of truth itself. Europe, with its intricate tapestry of kingdoms, duchies, and principalities, presents a historical landscape that is as beautiful as it is deceptive. At first glance, the records of kings and queens, marriages, and treaties suggest order and clarity. Yet when one examines the genealogies in detail, a far more complex picture emerges: a hidden network of connections, alliances, and secret unions that mainstream history rarely acknowledges. These hidden genealogies reveal patterns suggesting that certain families were not just rulers by chance or conquest, but by design, maintaining influence through carefully orchestrated bloodlines. The concept of strategic marriage is well known, but what is often overlooked is the depth of planning involved. Royal unions were rarely for love, diplomacy alone, or public advantage. They often served a dual purpose: consolidating political power and preserving sacred or esoteric knowledge within the bloodline. Consider the marriage alliances between the Capetians of France and the Habsburgs of Austria. On the surface, these unions were about diplomacy, securing borders, and fostering peace. Beneath the surface, however, these marriages created an intricate web linking families across nations, ensuring that specific lineages, knowledge, and influence remained concentrated among select dynasties. This pattern repeated itself across centuries, creating a hidden map of power encoded in blood, geography, and marriage. Genealogical records, often buried in private archives or lost in the folds of monasteries, sometimes reveal startling connections. Families that appeared unrelated on public charts share common ancestors, indicating secret intermarriages and long-term planning. In some cases, entire branches of a dynasty were obscured or misrepresented to hide politically inconvenient relationships. For example, whispers of secret unions among the Merovingians and lesser-known noble families suggest that these connections were deliberately concealed to protect the continuity of a bloodline that carried both authority and forbidden knowledge. Such genealogical manipulations ensured that power and knowledge flowed only to those deemed worthy, while other potential heirs were sidelined, erased, or forgotten. Hidden genealogies also intersect with religious institutions. The Church, far from being a neutral observer, played a central role in legitimizing marriages, recording lineages, and occasionally suppressing inconvenient truths. Papal dispensations for marriages between close relatives were not just bureaucratic formalities. They were instruments of control, allowing rulers to consolidate bloodlines while maintaining the illusion of legitimacy. In some cases, religious authorities were complicit in obscuring genealogical records, ensuring that the succession of certain families remained undisputed and that knowledge associated with these lines stayed protected. These intersections between religious authority and lineage concealment reveal the intricate mechanisms through which power was preserved across centuries. Maps, estates, and land inheritance also provide clues to hidden genealogical networks. Certain territories were passed quietly to distant relatives, often under the radar of public record, to preserve strategic bloodlines. Castles, estates, and even monasteries functioned as centers for the protection of heirs, sometimes housing children removed from succession or training them in secrecy. The geography of power, in this sense, was as much a tool of control as the throne itself. A castle perched on a remote hill or a secluded monastery in the countryside could conceal heirs who were integral to the survival of a lineage, hidden from the chaos of politics and war. The symbolic aspect of hidden genealogies cannot be overlooked. Heraldry, coats of arms, and family emblems often contained encoded references to secret alliances, ancestral knowledge, and esoteric connections. To the casual observer, these symbols appeared decorative, but for those who understood the language, they communicated lineage, inheritance rights, and hidden relationships. In some cases, symbols embedded in architecture, paintings, and manuscripts acted as genealogical markers, preserving connections that were deliberately omitted from official histories. The visual language of lineage ensured that the secret threads of power endured even when public records did not. The consequences of these hidden genealogies extend beyond history into the realm of influence and control. By maintaining tightly controlled networks of bloodlines, certain families were able to influence political decisions, succession disputes, and even wars across generations. Knowledge of these connections allowed some rulers to anticipate threats, manipulate alliances, and ensure that their dynasties survived while rivals were neutralized. The hidden genealogical web functioned as a stabilizing force for those in the know, while to outsiders, succession and alliances appeared chaotic, arbitrary, or driven purely by chance. Moreover, these hidden genealogical networks often intersected with secret societies, prophecies, and esoteric teachings. Knowledge about the continuity of bloodlines, the placement of heirs, and the significance of certain unions was sometimes preserved within lodges, monasteries, or mystical orders. This secrecy reinforced the idea that bloodlines were sacred and that the survival of a lineage was more than political. It was spiritual, mystical, and deliberately guarded. The intertwining of genealogy and esoteric knowledge ensured that certain families retained power across generations, often shaping the course of European history in ways invisible to the public eye. Understanding Europe's hidden genealogies requires looking beyond official records, public histories, and mainstream narratives. It demands an awareness of the deliberate concealment, the strategic marriages, and the symbolic markers that have preserved these bloodlines through centuries of upheaval. These connections form an invisible network of influence, a hidden architecture of power that has quietly shaped the political and spiritual landscape of Europe. By tracing these genealogical threads, one begins to see a pattern, one in which survival, secrecy, and strategy outweigh fortune, charisma, or battlefield success. The implications are staggering. History, as recorded, is only part of the story. Beneath the surface lies a carefully constructed network of relationships, secrets, and hidden knowledge, all preserved through blood. Europe's hidden genealogies reveal that the past is more than events and dates. It is a living, breathing architecture of power, shaped by those who understood the extraordinary value of inheritance, knowledge, and secrecy. To follow these hidden lines is to glimpse the invisible hand that has guided nations, dynasties, and the very course of history itself. The story of royal bloodlines is not written solely in chronicles or hidden genealogies. It is etched into objects, relics, and artifacts that have survived the passage of time. Across Europe and beyond, treasures and sacred items carry subtle clues about lineage, legitimacy, and power. To the casual observer, they may appear as symbols of opulence or devotion, but to those who understand their deeper significance, they're coded records of history, carefully designed to preserve secrets that rulers and secret societies wish to safeguard. These artifacts, often overlooked in mainstream historical narratives, hold the potential to reveal truths deliberately obscured by centuries of selective storytelling. Consider the Holy Grail, one of the most famous and enduring symbols of hidden power. Popular culture presents it as a chalice of miraculous abilities. Yet some historians and occult scholars suggest it may have been a metaphor for a sacred bloodline. In this interpretation, the Grail was not an object of mere spiritual devotion, but a symbol of lineage continuity, a vessel preserving the knowledge and influence of a hidden family. Knights, crusaders, and mystics who pursued the Grail may have been participating in a tradition of secrecy, safeguarding the bloodline through quests and rituals whose true purpose was rarely understood by the wider world. Relics associated with saints and monarchs offer additional examples. Crown jewels, scepters, and ceremonial regalia often incorporated symbols of ancestral lineage or hidden alliances. Gems and metals may have been selected for more than beauty or value. They could signify continuity, spiritual potency, or coded messages intelligible only to initiates. In cathedrals and palaces, these objects were displayed to project authority, yet they simultaneously acted as repositories of knowledge and indicators of legitimate succession. Every engraved pattern, every carved emblem, and every ceremonial use may have carried layers of meaning meant to protect and communicate the true nature of a bloodline. Hidden manuscripts and ancient texts also form a crucial part of this narrative. Illuminated codices, scrolls preserved in monasteries, and privately commissioned chronicles often contain genealogical information, esoteric knowledge, or references to suppressed heirs. While mainstream historians may dismiss these records as decorative or allegorical, closer examination reveals that they frequently encode details about the relationships, marriages, and alliances that sustained certain bloodlines. Marginalia, symbolic illustrations, and cryptic annotations may have been deliberately designed to conceal their meaning from the uninitiated, ensuring that only those with the proper knowledge could decode the truth. Even architecture can serve as a form of hidden evidence. Palaces, castles, and religious structures often incorporate symbolic motifs or geometric patterns that point to secret histories. Hidden chambers, crypts, and inscriptions may indicate the existence of heirs removed from public records or alliances concealed from political rivals. The layout of buildings, the positioning of altars, and the choice of decorative motifs can all function as markers of bloodline continuity, preserving history in a form that is invisible to casual observers but intelligible to insiders who understand the symbolic language of the elite. Artifacts are not limited to Europe. Across the world, sacred objects, ceremonial tools, and heirlooms have been used to preserve the continuity of lineage. In Japan, imperial regalia, the sword, the mirror, and the jewel signify the legitimacy of the emperor and the divine origin of the dynasty. In India, Ritual objects associated with royal families encode spiritual authority and ancestral connections. Even when these items are publicly displayed, their deeper significance is often concealed, accessible only to those who understand the cultural, spiritual, and genealogical context. In every case, the artifacts serve a dual purpose: outwardly ceremonial, inwardly protective of knowledge and lineage. Coins, seals, and medallions also offer hidden testimony. Their inscriptions, imagery, and symbols may reference ancestry, sacred alliances, or claims of legitimacy that were too sensitive to record openly in chronicles. A seemingly innocuous coin could subtly communicate the rightful heir or commemorate a suppressed branch of a dynasty. These objects circulated widely, carrying with them encoded information, and yet only a few could decipher their full meaning. Through such subtle mechanisms, rulers ensured that knowledge of the true lineages persisted even when public records omitted them. The deliberate concealment and preservation of these artifacts raise important questions. If the truth about royal bloodlines were readily accessible, it could destabilize established power structures, expose hidden alliances, or reveal the existence of suppressed heirs. By embedding knowledge in objects, architecture, and manuscripts, those in power created a multi-layered system of protection, ensuring that only the initiated could access critical information. The artifacts became silent witnesses, preserving the integrity of bloodlines and safeguarding secrets from both enemies and the public. Finally, it is essential to recognize the modern implications of these artifacts. Many of the items that survived into the present day are still housed in private collections, museums, or religious institutions. Their significance is often downplayed, their meanings obscured, and their connections to hidden bloodlines left unexplored. Yet by studying these objects carefully, their symbolism, provenance, and history, we can begin to uncover a narrative deliberately hidden from the public eye. Each artifact becomes a portal to a past where lineage, power, and secrecy were inseparable, where knowledge was preserved in plain sight, waiting for those willing to see beyond the surface. In essence, artifacts, relics, and hidden objects provide tangible evidence of a history that mainstream records attempt to obscure. They are proof that power and lineage were carefully curated, preserved, and transmitted through means beyond mere documentation. From chalices to crowns, from manuscripts to monuments, the material world itself serves as a testament to the hidden continuity of bloodlines and the secrets they carried. To understand the truth of royal influence, one must pay attention not only to chronicles and genealogies, but also to the silent, enduring messages embedded in the artifacts that have survived through the ages, proof that history often hides in plain sight. Throughout the ages, rulers and dynasties have looked to the future with a mixture of fear, hope, and curiosity. Prophecies, once dismissed as superstition or literary flourish, often played a profound role in shaping the decisions of kings and queens. From the Sibyls of ancient Rome to the cryptic quatrains of Nostradamus, predictive texts provided guidance, or at least the perception of guidance, in an unpredictable world. Yet beyond mere fortune-telling, these prophecies frequently intersected with the continuity of bloodlines, serving as both warnings and instruments of control for families seeking to preserve power across generations. Prophecies often functioned as strategic tools. By declaring that certain rulers or dynasties were predestined to govern, they reinforced legitimacy and deterred challenges. Conversely, they could be manipulated to undermine rivals, justify succession changes, or erase inconvenient heirs from official history. For the initiated, these predictive texts were not simply mystical. They were practical, guiding political decisions and safeguarding the continuity of select bloodlines. A king who claimed divine sanction, bolstered by prophecy, could wield influence not only through armies or alliances, but through the perception of fate itself. The Merovingian dynasty provides a compelling example. Esoteric traditions suggest that certain prophecies, preserved in secret manuscripts, guided the actions of rulers and advisors alike. These prophecies were said to indicate which heirs were legitimate carriers of sacred knowledge and which should be removed or hidden. In this context, the famous lost bloodline of the Merovingians may not have been lost to chance, but carefully protected under the guidance of foretold instruction. Such prophecies blurred the line between fate and strategy, giving rulers the impression, or justification, that they were acting under divine or mystical directive. Medieval Europe abounded with prophetic traditions. The Sibylline prophecies, the writings of Merlin, and cryptic ecclesiastical predictions often intertwined political guidance with spiritual warning. Monarchs consulted seers, astrologers, and mystics, not merely for advice on military campaigns, but for insight into succession, alliances, and lineage preservation. The prophetic texts were multi-layered. Publicly accessible versions could inspire or control the masses, while secret interpretations conveyed crucial information to the ruling elite. This duality ensured that prophecy functioned both as a tool of governance and as a method of safeguarding knowledge within selected bloodlines. Prophecies were also used to justify erasures and concealments. A sudden disappearance of an heir, a mysterious death, or an unexpected succession could be framed as the fulfillment of prediction, masking deliberate intervention. By presenting calculated political moves as destiny, rulers and advisors created the illusion that lineage, power, and knowledge were under the guidance of forces beyond human comprehension. This gave legitimacy to decisions that might otherwise provoke resistance, preserving both the continuity of bloodlines and the secrecy of their associated knowledge. Outside of Europe, predictive traditions played a similar role. In China, the I Ching and astrological calculations guided imperial succession and warned of dynastic instability. In India, Vedic prophecies and astrological charts influenced which heirs would ascend the throne and how sacred knowledge should be preserved. Across cultures, prophecy functioned not merely as spiritual guidance, but as a practical tool to protect lineage, guide political decisions, and maintain continuity. The recurring theme is unmistakable. Rulers who could interpret or control prophecy held a powerful advantage over those who relied solely on force or diplomacy. The intertwining of prophecy and bloodline also intersected with secret societies. Esoteric orders often held copies of predictive texts or oral traditions that were not available to the public. These societies guided rulers, advised on succession, and ensured that heirs carrying the right lineage were safeguarded. In some cases, these groups acted as the silent enforcers of prophecy, orchestrating events that appeared to fulfill foretold outcomes while keeping the continuity of sacred bloodlines intact. By controlling knowledge of the future, they could manipulate perception, influence decisions, and protect the dynasties they served. Art, literature, and architecture also concealed prophetic messages. Cathedrals, illuminated manuscripts, and royal portraits frequently contained symbolic references to predicted events or divine guidance. These clues, often indecipherable to the uninitiated, served as markers of legitimacy, warning, or preparation. A ruler who could read the signs embedded in sacred art would be equipped to anticipate challenges, align alliances, and protect the continuity of the bloodline. In essence, prophecy became a language of secrecy, communicated through texts, symbols, and objects, ensuring that those who carried knowledge of the future could also preserve knowledge of lineage. Even today, the echoes of these predictive traditions remain. Hidden texts, coded manuscripts, and symbolic representations continue to hint at the way bloodlines were guided and protected by prophecy. While mainstream history largely overlooks these influences, a careful examination of both public and secret records reveals a continuity of guidance, intervention, and foresight that transcends mere coincidence. Prophecy, it seems, was not only a tool for spiritual reflection, but a carefully managed instrument of dynastic preservation. By studying these prophecies, one begins to understand the subtle but profound mechanisms by which certain families maintain power. Bloodlines were not simply inherited. They were guided, protected, and reinforced by knowledge of predicted events. The interplay of fate, strategy, and secrecy ensured that the most valuable lineages endured, often quietly, in the shadows of recorded history. Prophecy was not an abstract ideal. It was a practical framework for survival, control, and the preservation of sacred knowledge through generations. In conclusion, prophecies and predictive history reveal a hidden layer of influence that shaped the course of dynasties and the preservation of bloodlines. Far from being mere superstition, these texts functioned as instruments of strategy, guidance, and protection. They ensured that certain heirs were safeguarded, certain decisions were justified, and certain secrets remained hidden. To understand the hidden history of royal bloodlines, one must look beyond chronicles and genealogies and consider the profound role of prophecy, a force that quietly, yet powerfully, shaped the destiny of rulers, dynasties, and nations across centuries. History is full of sudden deaths, unexplained disappearances, and abrupt changes in succession. While some of these events can be attributed to disease, accidents, or warfare, a closer examination reveals a more deliberate pattern, one in which the removal of a ruler, heir, or rival served the preservation of certain bloodlines and the concealment of powerful secrets. Across centuries, dynasties have been shaped not only by conquest and diplomacy, but by calculated conspiracies, often hidden from the public eye, whose implications continue to echo through history. Consider the notorious fate of Edward V of England, one of the so-called princes in the Tower. Alongside his younger brother, he vanished mysteriously, with the official record offering no clear explanation. Historians have speculated about murder, imprisonment, and political manipulation, but what is less often discussed is the possibility that their disappearance served a deliberate purpose in preserving or consolidating dynastic bloodlines. The erasure of inconvenient heirs has been a recurring theme in European history, where power, lineage, and secret knowledge were carefully protected, sometimes at the cost of human life. The French monarchy provides another striking example. During the wars of religion and the subsequent succession crises, numerous heirs were removed from power, imprisoned, or quietly executed. Many of these actions were justified publicly as political necessity, yet they may have also been driven by the desire to safeguard secret knowledge or protect certain bloodlines. Hidden manuscripts and correspondences from the period hint at alliances between nobles, clergy, and esoteric advisors who guided decisions behind the scenes. These conspiracies ensured that the right heirs survived while potential threats, however legitimate by blood, were neutralized. The use of mysterious deaths as a political tool was not limited to medieval Europe. Across Asia, royal courts frequently dealt with succession disputes through covert elimination. In China, palace intrigue often led to the sudden death of princes, concubines, or advisors who threatened the stability of the dynasty. The careful documentation, or deliberate absence of documentation, of these deaths highlights a recurring theme. Those in power manipulated mortality as a means of control. Knowledge of the bloodline, the position of heirs, and the preservation of sacred lineage frequently dictated life and death decisions. Secret societies, often closely tied to royal families, played a subtle but critical role in orchestrating or concealing these conspiracies. Knights, masons, and esoteric orders sometimes acted as enforcers of dynastic continuity, ensuring that succession proceeded according to hidden principles rather than public logic. By controlling information, influencing decisions, and guiding rulers, these groups shaped outcomes that appeared natural or inevitable to the outside world. The disappearance of an heir or the sudden death of a monarch could be framed as destiny, disease, or misfortune, while in reality, it was the result of deliberate planning and careful execution. Mysterious deaths often carried symbolic meaning. Assassinations or disappearances were sometimes timed to coincide with celestial events, religious observances, or political milestones, signaling to insiders that these actions were sanctioned within the hidden framework of bloodline preservation. For the general populace, these events seemed chaotic or inexplicable, For the initiated, they were highly structured, a form of communication and control. Such actions reinforced the perception that royal power was ordained, while simultaneously protecting the secrets and continuity of sacred lineages. Even when rulers survived, conspiracy shaped their reigns in subtler ways. Poisonings, mysterious accidents, and sudden illnesses frequently removed advisors, competitors, or inconvenient heirs, consolidating power without drawing suspicion. The perception of divine favor or destiny was reinforced, while the underlying manipulations remained hidden. Throughout Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, this pattern emerges consistently. Those who controlled information and lineage could orchestrate outcomes that appeared natural, preserving bloodlines, secrets, and authority across generations. Art and literature sometimes provide cryptic clues to these conspiracies. Portraits of monarchs, illuminated manuscripts, and ceremonial documents often contain subtle references to removed heirs, hidden alliances, or threats neutralized. Symbolic gestures, positioning of figures, and inclusion of certain objects serve as markers intelligible only to the informed observer. These hidden messages preserve the memory of events that were otherwise expunged from official records, hinting at the intricate web of conspiracies that guided royal succession. The consequences of these conspiracies extend far beyond the events themselves. The deliberate removal of heirs and rivals reshaped the trajectory of nations, altered political alliances, and influenced wars, treaties, and revolutions. Dynasties that survived centuries of upheaval often did so not merely through luck or strategy in battle, but through careful management of life, death, and secrecy. Bloodlines that endured were those protected by both political acumen and hidden guardianship, ensuring that knowledge, influence, and legitimacy remained concentrated within select families. Modern historians frequently struggle to reconcile these mysterious deaths and disappearances with the official narrative. Missing heirs, sudden deaths, and inexplicable successions are often explained away as accidents, illness, or poor record-keeping. Yet the consistency of these patterns across centuries and cultures suggests deliberate intervention. By examining hidden manuscripts, secret correspondence, and symbolic representations, researchers can begin to reconstruct a parallel history, one in which conspiracies, calculated deaths, and concealed manipulations were integral to the preservation of power and the continuity of royal bloodlines. In conclusion, royal conspiracies and mysterious deaths reveal the hidden mechanisms by which dynasties maintained authority. Far from random or purely political, these events were frequently orchestrated to protect sacred bloodlines, preserve secret knowledge, and ensure continuity in the face of threats. The disappearance of heirs, sudden deaths of rulers, and covert manipulations were not anomalies of history. They were deliberate strategies in a long game of preservation and secrecy. Understanding these conspiracies allows us to see beyond the public narrative, exposing a shadow history where bloodlines, power, and secrecy were inseparable, and where the course of nations was quietly guided by forces hidden from plain sight. For centuries, scholars, mystics, and rulers have hinted at a hidden connection between royal bloodlines and esoteric knowledge. This knowledge, often described as secret, mystical, or forbidden, was believed to grant extraordinary influence, foresight, and spiritual authority. While mainstream history frames rulers' power as political, military, or economic, a deeper examination suggests that certain families wielded influence through mastery of hidden wisdom, a knowledge carefully guarded, passed down through generations, and often encoded within rituals, artifacts, and traditions. The Merovingians, often central to theories of sacred lineage, provide a compelling example. Their purported bloodline, sometimes referred to as the divine or sacred line, was associated not merely with kingship, but with secret knowledge, mystical insights about prophecy, astronomy, and spiritual practices. Some scholars suggest that this knowledge was preserved through oral tradition, esoteric rituals, and hidden manuscripts, accessible only to initiated members of the family and closely allied secret societies. It was not wealth or armies alone that ensured the survival of this line. It was the careful protection of knowledge too potent to be shared openly. Secret societies, the Templars, Rosicrucians, and later Masonic lodges, often served as custodians of this esoteric wisdom. Far from being purely ceremonial or philosophical, these organizations functioned as networks to transmit knowledge, preserve sacred lineages, and guide rulers who could harness the power of such insight. Rituals, coded symbols, and initiatory practices ensured that the wisdom remained concentrated among the select few, safeguarding both the knowledge and the bloodlines entrusted to it. In effect, esoteric knowledge was inseparable from legitimacy, forming a hidden pillar of dynastic continuity. Artifacts, too, played a critical role in preserving and communicating this knowledge. Objects ranging from ceremonial chalices to engraved rings and illuminated manuscripts were designed to encode meaning. To the uninitiated, these items appeared decorative or symbolic. To those with understanding, they were repositories of profound wisdom. In some cases, the design, material, or inscriptions of a royal artifact were directly linked to astrological events, prophetic guidance, or metaphysical principles, guiding the actions of rulers while remaining hidden from public scrutiny. Each item became a silent teacher, imparting knowledge in a form intelligible only to those prepared to interpret it. Blood itself was often treated as a vessel of power. Many esoteric traditions maintained that certain lineages carried inherent spiritual authority or mystical potential, passed through generations. This belief informed marriage choices, succession planning, and alliances between families. Marriages were not merely political. They were a means of preserving the integrity of a sacred lineage, ensuring that the right blood carried the associated knowledge. Children born into these lines were often trained in secrecy, taught rituals, and introduced to teachings unavailable to outsiders, continuing the transmission of wisdom across centuries. Prophecy, deeply intertwined with esoteric knowledge, further reinforced the importance of bloodlines. Families possessing sacred lineage were often depicted in predictions as destined rulers or custodians of spiritual insight. These prophecies were not casual predictions, but carefully preserved frameworks that guided both political action and the safeguarding of wisdom. The selective interpretation of prophetic texts allowed rulers and secret societies to justify decisions, protect heirs, and conceal truth from the general populace. In this way, prophecy and esoteric knowledge acted together as instruments of continuity and control. Education and mentorship were also crucial. Heirs from sacred bloodlines were frequently instructed in subjects considered arcane or forbidden: alchemy, astrology, sacred geometry, cryptography, and mystical philosophy. This training served dual purposes. It reinforced the legitimacy of the bloodline and ensured that knowledge remained in the hands of those deemed capable of wielding it responsibly. Outsiders, including rival nobles and the general populace, were systematically excluded from these teachings, reinforcing the divide between ordinary authority and sacred authority derived from esoteric insight. The consequences of this intertwining of blood and knowledge were profound. Families with access to hidden wisdom could anticipate political threats, manipulate alliances, and maintain power in ways that seemed inexplicable to those relying solely on conventional authority. The survival of certain dynasties, despite wars, plagues, and revolutions, may be partly explained by their mastery of these subtle, secret systems. Power was not always about armies or wealth. It was about insight, preparation, and a disciplined use of knowledge that most could not access or even comprehend. Even symbols and rituals reinforced this connection. Crowns, scepters, coronation ceremonies, and ceremonial robes were carefully designed to convey hidden meaning, aligning the ruler with cosmic principles, sacred lineage, or spiritual authority. These rituals were not merely theatrical. They were encoded forms of teaching, communicating esoteric wisdom to the ruler and initiated advisors. The public witnessed pageantry, while the inner circle understood deeper layers of meaning, reinforcing the inseparability of knowledge and bloodline. Modern historians often overlook these aspects, focusing on documented events, treaties, and military campaigns. Yet traces of esoteric influence remain visible if one knows where to look. Cryptic symbols in royal portraits, architectural designs aligned with celestial phenomena, or patterns in genealogical records. These traces suggest that esoteric knowledge was not a peripheral element of power, but a central tool used to preserve authority, influence succession, and protect sacred lineages. In essence, the fusion of bloodlines and esoteric knowledge reveals a hidden layer of history, one in which legitimacy, survival, and authority were shaped as much by wisdom and secrecy as by political or military prowess. To understand the true scope of royal influence, one must examine not just wars, treaties, and public actions, but the concealed knowledge that guided decisions, preserved heirs, and maintained dynasties for centuries. The bloodline and the knowledge it carried were inseparable, forming a continuous thread of hidden authority that has quietly shaped the course of human history. Few legends capture the imagination quite like the Holy Grail. Popularized in medieval romance and modern storytelling, it is often portrayed as a mystical chalice capable of granting eternal life or miraculous power. Yet beneath the myth lies a deeper, more enigmatic interpretation. The Grail as a symbol of sacred bloodlines, a repository of esoteric knowledge, and a guide for dynasties entrusted with hidden wisdom. Far from being a simple relic or allegory, the Grail appears intertwined with the survival and preservation of select royal families, offering clues to a narrative that mainstream history has largely overlooked. The connection between the Grail and royal bloodlines is most famously explored in theories surrounding the Merovingians. These early Frankish kings, often referred to as the first dynasty of sacred rulers in Europe, were said to carry a bloodline of extraordinary significance. Legends suggest that the Grail was less a cup of divine magic and more a coded symbol representing the continuity of this line, a sacred inheritance, passed from generation to generation, its secrets preserved for those who could interpret its meaning. In this interpretation, knights and mystics who sought the Grail were not merely seeking a physical object, but guardianship over a bloodline, tasked with ensuring the survival of knowledge too powerful for ordinary rulers or the general populace. Esoteric texts and cryptic manuscripts hint at the Grail's deeper purpose. Illuminated manuscripts from a medieval period often depict the Grail in ways that suggest it is symbolic of lineage, fertility, and the transmission of sacred knowledge. Certain patterns, colors, and iconography repeatedly appear alongside depictions of kings, queens, and knights, implying a hidden system of instruction. The Grail was simultaneously a symbol of divine authority and a practical tool for those entrusted with the continuity of a bloodline. Only those with the knowledge of its esoteric language could decode its true significance, transforming a seemingly mythic quest into a mechanism for preserving dynastic power. Knights and orders, particularly the Templars, played a critical role in the guardianship of these secrets. Ostensibly devoted to religious and military missions, the Templars were often tasked with protecting knowledge, sacred relics, and the continuity of bloodlines tied to the Grail. Their extensive networks across Europe, combined with their expertise in finance, travel, and cryptography, allowed them to operate as custodians of hidden wisdom. While popular history celebrates their bravery and military prowess, it is the Templars' role in protecting esoteric knowledge and guiding heirs that may have had the most enduring impact on the preservation of sacred lineages. The Grail legends also intersect with prophecies. Texts like the Arthurian romances and apocryphal chronicles hint at a divine mandate to protect certain lineages, often linking the Grail to the rise or fall of dynasties. Knights who embarked on Grail quests were not merely testing valor or virtue. They were executing a sacred duty to ensure that the bloodline carrying the right knowledge and spiritual authority remained intact. Success was less about obtaining the Grail as an object and more about completing a ritualized process of safeguarding heirs and wisdom, a theme repeated in secretive traditions across medieval Europe. Hidden genealogies further support the link between the Grail and royal bloodlines. Families whose lineage appears in obscure manuscripts often coincide with those connected to Grail lore, suggesting that certain bloodlines were intentionally preserved in secrecy. Marriages, alliances, and strategic placements of heirs can be read as practical measures to protect the Grail's symbolic legacy. In some cases, children of these lineages were raised in remote locations, monasteries, or under the protection of secret orders, shielded from public scrutiny and prepared to continue the sacred mandate. These measures indicate that the Grail functioned as a blueprint for dynastic preservation, guiding actions over centuries. Symbolism in art, architecture, and manuscripts further reinforces this connection. Gothic cathedrals, castles, and illuminated works frequently encode Grail imagery in ways that align with astrological events, dynastic succession, and ceremonial rites. For the uninitiated, these images appear decorative or allegorical. For those aware of their meaning, they communicate lineage, succession, and the guardianship of sacred knowledge. From hidden patterns in cathedral rose windows to subtle gestures in illuminated manuscripts, the Grail emerges as a symbol interwoven with dynastic continuity, esoteric wisdom, and ritualized preservation. The Grail's influence extends beyond Europe. Across cultures, sacred vessels, ceremonial relics, and heirlooms serve similar purposes, preserving lineage, encoding knowledge, and signaling legitimacy. From Japanese imperial regalia to sacred vessels in the Indian subcontinent, the principle remains consistent. Objects of spiritual and cultural significance often function as both symbols and tools of dynastic continuity. In the European context, the Grail occupies this role uniquely, combining legend, ritual, and bloodline preservation into a single, enduring mythos. Modern interpretations continue to overlook the Grail's hidden significance. Popular media emphasizes adventure, miracles, and treasure, obscuring the deeper truth that the Grail is a symbol of sacred continuity, a marker of hidden power, and a guide for those entrusted with esoteric knowledge. Scholars who examine genealogical records, secret manuscripts, and mystical orders begin to see a pattern. The Grail represents not only a spiritual quest, but a practical mechanism for ensuring the survival of chosen bloodlines through the centuries. In conclusion, the Grail legends illuminate a secret layer of history where myth, prophecy, and bloodline preservation intersect. Far from being merely a story of knights and miracles, the Grail serves as a symbolic framework for safeguarding esoteric knowledge, guiding heirs, and maintaining sacred dynasties. Its enduring mystery reflects the deliberate concealment and protection of power, wisdom, and lineage, a hidden architecture of influence that has quietly shaped the course of history for centuries. To follow the trail of the Grail is to uncover the intertwining of myth and reality, of legend and bloodline, and to glimpse the extraordinary lengths taken to protect the sacred continuity of rulers entrusted with knowledge far beyond ordinary understanding. Throughout history, secrets are often preserved not only in memory or oral tradition, but in carefully concealed documents, maps, and manuscripts. For royal bloodlines, such materials were crucial in safeguarding the truth about succession, alliances, and esoteric knowledge. These hidden records, often stored in monasteries, private archives, or secret chambers, served as silent witnesses to a reality deliberately obscured from public scrutiny. They're the tangible proof of a history that mainstream chronicles have systematically erased or ignored. In medieval Europe, cartography and maps were more than geographic tools. They were coded instruments of power. Certain maps depicted not only territories, but the hidden networks of influence, lineage, and sacred sites. For example, hidden references to estates, monasteries, or private chapels could indicate the presence of heirs removed from public succession. Maps sometimes marked safe havens for these heirs or sites where sacred knowledge was preserved. To the casual observer, these maps appeared as practical tools. To those in the know, they were encrypted guides to the continuity of bloodlines and the guardianship of esoteric wisdom. Documents such as charters, legal records, and genealogical charts were similarly manipulated. While official copies presented an orderly succession of kings, queens, and nobles, hidden variants preserved alternate truths. These secret documents often included erased heirs, concealed marriages, or alliances designed to protect sacred bloodlines. In some cases, marginal notes, coded symbols, or obscure annotations provided critical insight into the true structure of dynastic continuity. Such meticulous documentation ensured that even when heirs were removed from public history, their existence, legitimacy, and rights were preserved for those capable of reading the signs. Manuscripts and illuminated texts also played a significant role, hidden in monasteries or commissioned privately by ruling families. These works often contained symbolic genealogies and esoteric instructions. The illustrations, colors, and motifs encoded knowledge about alliances, prophecies, and sacred bloodlines. Only those trained in the interpretive language of these manuscripts could understand the full meaning. This system of concealed writing and symbolism allowed families to maintain control over knowledge, ensuring that only trusted heirs and allies could access the truths necessary to preserve their influence and lineage. Secret correspondences between rulers and their advisors further reveal the deliberate concealment of information. Letters, encrypted messages, and discreetly copied documents show that dynastic knowledge was tightly controlled. Some communications concern the placement of heirs in monasteries or foreign courts, while others discussed alliances designed to reinforce sacred bloodlines. In every case, the meticulous preservation and selective sharing of documents underscore the lengths to which families went to protect both blood and knowledge from public exposure or political rivals. Even architecture served as a record. Hidden rooms, sealed libraries, and cryptic inscriptions embedded in castles and palaces functioned as physical repositories of documents and maps. Secret chambers often held manuscripts detailing forbidden knowledge or lineage continuity, accessible only to those initiated into the family or a secret society. By embedding records within architecture, rulers ensured that knowledge survived not only through written words, but also through physical structures impervious to casual inspection. These spaces acted as safeguards, preserving history in plain sight, yet inaccessible to the uninitiated. The symbolism within documents and maps was equally important. Heraldic symbols, family crests, and decorative motifs were not mere embellishments. They encoded lineage, alliances, and esoteric teachings. A subtle pattern repeated across documents or maps could indicate the presence of a hidden heir or the continuation of a sacred line. By studying these patterns, scholars and initiates could reconstruct histories deliberately omitted from official chronicles. This encoded knowledge formed a silent system of verification, ensuring that those entrusted with preserving the bloodline could access crucial truths even centuries later. The existence of hidden documents also explains gaps and inconsistencies in mainstream genealogical records. Apparent disappearances of heirs, abrupt transitions in succession, or conflicting accounts of royal marriages often correspond to information preserved in secret texts. Far from being errors or oversight, these discrepancies suggest a deliberate strategy: the erasure of inconvenient truths from public history, while simultaneously maintaining them in protected records. Those in power understood that controlling information was as vital as controlling armies or territory. The survival of sacred bloodlines depended on secrecy, accuracy, and the careful management of documentation. Modern researchers occasionally stumble upon these hidden records, though their full significance is often obscured or dismissed. Rare manuscripts, long-forgotten maps, and obscure correspondences reveal tantalizing glimpses into a parallel history, a history in which bloodlines, knowledge, and sacred responsibility were meticulously guarded. Each newly discovered text or map adds another piece to the puzzle, demonstrating that dynastic continuity was far more complex and intentional than conventional history suggests. Ultimately, Hidden documents and maps represent more than evidence of erased heirs. They're testimonies of deliberate, centuries-long strategies to preserve sacred knowledge and protect lineage. They illuminate a world in which rulers and their trusted advisors worked behind the scenes, safeguarding secrets, guiding heirs, and orchestrating events that appeared random to the public, but were part of a coherent, carefully constructed plan. To study these hidden records is to peer into the inner workings of dynastic power, revealing the invisible architecture of influence and the extraordinary lengths taken to ensure that sacred bloodlines endured. In conclusion, the combination of secret documents, maps, manuscripts, and architectural repositories demonstrates that the history of royal bloodlines extends far beyond what is visible in mainstream accounts. These hidden materials preserve the truth of erased heirs, concealed alliances, and esoteric knowledge, forming an enduring record of power, strategy, and secrecy. They reveal a world where lineage and wisdom were inseparable, safeguarded not only in memory, but through meticulously preserved artifacts and texts. A world where the guardianship of bloodlines was as important as the rule itself, and where the past has been deliberately concealed to protect the sacred continuity of those chosen to inherit it. The secrets of royal bloodlines are not merely relics of the past. Their influence often extends into the modern era, shaping political structures, social hierarchies, and even global events in subtle yet profound ways. While kings and queens no longer wield absolute power in most countries, the legacies of hidden lineages continue to exert influence through institutions, wealth, and networks that remain largely invisible to the public eye. Understanding these implications requires looking beyond conventional history and recognizing the enduring reach of dynasties that preserved both blood and knowledge for centuries. Many modern elites trace their lineage to medieval and early modern monarchs, though such connections are often concealed or obscured. The implications are significant. Individuals and families with ties to sacred bloodlines often occupy positions of influence in politics, finance, and international organizations. Their authority is not always overt. It operates quietly through networks of trust, historical legacy, and sometimes esoteric knowledge that has been passed down along with the bloodline. In this sense, history has not ended. It has evolved, continuing to shape modern power structures in ways most people do not perceive. Wealth is one of the most tangible legacies of hidden royal bloodlines. Estates, private holdings, and family trusts often originate from centuries-old dynasties whose influence was meticulously preserved. While these assets may appear as ordinary private wealth, many of them carry symbolic and historical significance, linking modern holders to long-forgotten estates, titles, and privileges. These assets are frequently managed through complex legal structures, ensuring continuity while obscuring their historical and dynastic origins. The intertwining of wealth and lineage allows modern heirs to exercise influence discreetly, guided by the same principles that governed royal succession in centuries past. Political influence is another enduring aspect. Members of hidden bloodlines often maintain informal networks that span continents, connecting political leaders, financiers, and influential figures. While these networks are not always visible, they can guide decisions, shape policies, and maintain stability in ways that mimic the subtle governance once exercised by monarchs. Through philanthropy, advisory roles, and private diplomacy, modern heirs of royal bloodlines exert influence that, while largely invisible, continues the strategic preservation of power practiced by their ancestors. Cultural institutions also reflect the influence of these hidden lineages. Foundations, museums, and academic institutions sometimes preserve manuscripts, artifacts, and traditions associated with royal families. Though publicly framed as charitable or scholarly endeavors, these institutions can serve as channels for maintaining the continuity of knowledge, promoting the legitimacy of certain lineages, and subtly reinforcing cultural hierarchies. In this way, the preservation of esoteric knowledge and historical authority continues, even in societies that no longer recognize absolute monarchy. Prophecy and mysticism, though less visible today, continue to intersect with modern bloodlines. Certain families maintain traditions that connect them to historical predictive practices, using knowledge of astrological patterns, symbolic events, or ancestral guidance to make strategic decisions. While these practices are often hidden from public scrutiny, they echo the ancient use of prophecy to protect sacred bloodlines, demonstrating that esoteric knowledge and lineage preservation remain intertwined. Modern dynasties may not openly consult seers or knights, but the principles of foresight, strategic planning, and legacy protection persist. Marriage and alliances remain subtly significant in the modern context. While love and personal choice dominate public narratives, elite families often consider lineage, heritage, and historical continuity in forming unions. These considerations are rarely overt, but reflect centuries of tradition in which bloodlines, inheritance, and social influence were inseparable. By maintaining these connections, modern heirs ensure that certain dynastic networks and legacies continue, preserving both symbolic and practical influence across generations. Media and popular culture also play a role in concealing or framing the legacy of royal bloodlines. Films, literature, and news coverage often focus on surface-level narratives of celebrity or prestige, diverting attention from the historical continuity and hidden influence of bloodlines. In some cases, this has the effect of normalizing elite networks while obscuring the historical strategies that created and maintained them. Awareness of this dynamic is essential for understanding how hidden dynastic influence operates in contemporary society, often under the guise of ordinary social or political interactions. Global finance provides another layer of influence. Many modern heirs of royal bloodlines are involved in private banking, investment, and wealth management networks that extend across borders. These networks often operate with discretion, and while their overt activities are legal and public, their historical roots trace back to centuries of dynastic strategy, inheritance, and preservation. By understanding the historical continuity of these networks, it becomes clear that modern economic power is often built on foundations laid by hidden royal lineages, strategically preserved over time. Even in modern politics, the legacy of hidden bloodlines can manifest in subtle ways. Diplomatic protocols, ceremonial positions, and advisory roles often reinforce continuity with historical precedent, sometimes granting influence to those whose lineage qualifies them as heirs to symbolic authority. Monarchies that remain today, though largely constitutional, still carry ceremonial and symbolic power that reinforces the visibility of dynasties and their connections. In essence, modern governance and influence are often shaped by invisible threads that trace back to the deliberate preservation of bloodlines over centuries. Finally, the modern implications of hidden royal bloodlines extend beyond tangible wealth, politics, or institutions. They shape perceptions, cultural norms, and the subtle architecture of influence that govern societies. Understanding these hidden networks reveals that history did not end with the fall of absolute monarchy. It transformed. Sacred lineages, once guarded through secret orders, hidden marriages, and cryptic documents, now continue to guide the world through networks of influence that are largely invisible but extraordinarily powerful. The preservation of bloodlines, knowledge, and strategic authority remains a living legacy, one that quietly shapes our modern world, its decisions, and the very structures of power we often take for granted. In conclusion, the hidden royal bloodlines of history are far from mere relics of a bygone era. Their legacies persist in wealth, political influence, cultural institutions, and strategic networks that continue to shape society today. By tracing these hidden connections, one can see the enduring power of dynastic continuity, a force that has survived revolutions, wars, and social transformations. Understanding these implications allows us to recognize that history is not simply past events. It is an ongoing system of influence, guided by those who have preserved both blood and knowledge across centuries, shaping the modern world in ways that remain largely unseen yet profoundly felt. The preservation of royal bloodlines has rarely been left to chance. Throughout history, secret societies, mystical orders, and clandestine organizations have played a critical role in safeguarding lineage, guiding succession, and protecting esoteric knowledge. These societies operated in the shadows, invisible to the general populace, yet exerting extraordinary influence over dynasties, politics, and the course of history. Their reach, networks, and methods were as sophisticated as any modern intelligence agency, designed to ensure the continuity of power and the preservation of sacred knowledge. Among the most famous of these organizations were the Knights Templar. Ostensibly a religious military order, the Templars amassed wealth, knowledge, and influence unparalleled in medieval Europe. Beyond their battlefield achievements, they acted as custodians of sacred relics, secret documents, and bloodline continuity. They protected heirs, secured the transfer of power, and preserved knowledge that was considered too potent or dangerous for the general populace. The disappearance of the order in the early 14th century remains shrouded in mystery, but some historians and esoteric scholars suggest that it was not an abrupt end, but a transformation, a dispersal of guardians who continued their mission under other guises, maintaining control over bloodlines from behind the scenes. The Rosicrucians, emerging in the early 17th century, offer another example of the intertwining of secret knowledge and dynastic influence. This mystical society claimed access to hidden wisdom, alchemical, philosophical, and esoteric, that could illuminate the path of rulers and guide the destiny of families deemed sacred or chosen. While their teachings appear symbolic and allegorical, the practical applications were profound. Members of this society often advised monarchs, influenced court decisions, and safeguarded heirs whose existence or legitimacy might have been politically inconvenient. Through coded texts, rituals, and allegorical instruction, the Rosicrucians maintained continuity of knowledge alongside continuity of bloodlines. Freemasonry, arguably the most enduring and widespread secret society, similarly influenced dynastic affairs. From its origins in the late Middle Ages, it provided a framework for transmitting knowledge, ethics, and strategic guidance to those initiated into its ranks. Many royal families, particularly in Europe, had ties to Masonic lodges, which offered a network of secrecy, counsel, and coordination. Through Freemasonry, hidden alliances were formed, marriages were sanctioned, and heirs were guided according to principles that emphasized both lineage preservation and moral stewardship. Though often dismissed in public discourse as symbolic or ceremonial, the network of Freemasonry functioned as an invisible thread connecting bloodlines across generations and geography. The influence of these societies extended beyond guidance to active intervention. Historical accounts suggest that secret orders orchestrated marriages, removals, and protection of heirs to ensure the survival of sacred bloodlines. When political or military threats endangered dynasties, these societies could act decisively, manipulating events behind the scenes to maintain continuity. Sudden deaths, disappearances, or unexpected successions were not always chaotic. They were sometimes the result of careful orchestration, ensuring that only those prepared to uphold the sacred mandate of blood and knowledge survived. The power of these societies lay in their ability to influence the visible world while remaining hidden from scrutiny. Ritual and symbolism were central to the function of secret societies. Ceremonies were not merely decorative. They encoded instruction, ethics, and knowledge. Initiates were often taught genealogical secrets, esoteric wisdom, and methods of influence. Crowns, scepters, ceremonial robes, and other objects were imbued with symbolism that connected the ruler to sacred lineage, cosmic principles, or ancestral authority. Through ritual, symbolism, and coded instruction, societies ensured that knowledge was passed accurately, that heirs were properly trained, and that dynasties remained aligned with the hidden order. This was not superstition. It was a highly structured method of governance and lineage preservation. The interplay between prophecy and secret societies further enhanced their power. Orders often possessed or interpreted prophetic texts, guiding the decisions of rulers based on esoteric insight. While prophecy might appear mystical or allegorical to outsiders, for initiates, it provided a roadmap for protecting bloodlines, determining marriages, or safeguarding heirs. The combination of foresight, ritual, and strategic guidance gave these societies the ability to influence events over centuries, ensuring that sacred lineages survived wars, revolutions, and political upheaval. Artifacts and hidden documents were another domain of control. Societies often safeguarded manuscripts, maps, and relics that contained genealogical information or esoteric knowledge. These materials served as both proof and instruction, guiding rulers and heirs while preserving the continuity of dynasties. In some cases, these objects were deliberately hidden in monasteries, castles, or secret chambers, accessible only to those initiated into the society. This created a multi-layered system of preservation, where knowledge, lineage, and ritual were all intertwined, ensuring that dynasties could endure even under threat. The reach of secret societies was global. From Europe to the Middle East, Asia, and beyond, orders maintained networks that transcended borders. This allowed for coordination between royal families, protection of heirs in distant lands, and the transmission of esoteric knowledge across generations and continents. Their influence was subtle but profound, affecting marriages, alliances, political decisions, and the very perception of legitimacy. Modern historians, focusing on public records, battles, and treaties, often miss this hidden layer of power. Yet it is clear that secret societies functioned as the invisible custodians of dynastic continuity. Even in modern times, the legacy of these societies persists. Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and other orders continue to maintain networks of influence, subtly shaping cultural, political, and financial institutions. While the overt power of kings and queens has diminished, the mechanisms developed over centuries to safeguard bloodlines and knowledge endure. Initiatory practices, coded communication, and ceremonial symbolism remain tools for continuity, linking the past with the present in ways that are largely invisible but remarkably effective. The ethical and philosophical dimension of these societies is equally significant. They often emphasized stewardship, responsibility, and the careful use of knowledge. The preservation of bloodlines was not solely about power. It was intertwined with a moral and spiritual obligation to protect wisdom, uphold traditions, and maintain stability. This philosophy underpinned their actions, guiding both intervention and instruction, ensuring that dynasties survived not only physically, but also ethically and spiritually aligned with the society's principles. In essence, secret societies functioned as the hidden architects of history. They maintained the continuity of royal bloodlines, safeguarded esoteric knowledge, and influenced events in ways unseen by the public eye. Through ritual, prophecy, mentorship, and strategic intervention, they ensured that dynasties could endure, secrets could survive, and sacred lineage could be preserved. The interplay of secrecy, power, and knowledge allowed them to operate across centuries, continents, and political systems, shaping the course of human history from the shadows. In conclusion, the influence of secret societies over royal bloodlines demonstrates the profound lengths to which history has been orchestrated behind the scenes. These organizations, operating in secrecy, were not passive observers, but active custodians of lineage and knowledge, guiding rulers, shaping events, and preserving sacred bloodlines against threats, both visible and hidden. Understanding their role allows us to see history not as a series of chaotic events, but as a carefully managed continuum in which knowledge, power, and bloodlines were intricately intertwined. Even today, their legacy endures, an invisible web of influence, subtly shaping the modern world, and reminding us that the preservation of royal bloodlines has always been about more than crowns and thrones. It is about knowledge, secrecy, and the continuity of a hidden order that stretches across centuries.
As we reach the climactic point of our journey through hidden bloodlines, esoteric knowledge, and secret societies, the magnitude of the truth becomes unavoidable. Across centuries, dynasties have not only wielded power, but carefully curated a narrative, a version of history that erased inconvenient truths, concealed sacred lineages, and obscured knowledge deemed too dangerous for public awareness. The ultimate revelation is that much of what we consider official history is only a surface layer, hiding a vast, intricate web of influence, secrecy, and preservation that spans continents and generations. Evidence of deliberate erasure is everywhere, from missing heirs to abrupt successions, from cryptic documents to hidden maps. History repeatedly hints at stories that were never meant to be told. Some rulers disappeared without explanation, their lineages quietly maintained by secret guardians. Manuscripts were coded, maps encrypted, and artifacts embedded with meaning intelligible only to initiates. The erasure was not accidental. It was a calculated effort to protect knowledge and bloodlines, to ensure that only those chosen could inherit both power and insight. By removing inconvenient truths from public consciousness, dynasties and their allied societies preserved continuity and influence in ways nearly invisible to outsiders. The significance of these concealed truths extends far beyond lineage. Hidden knowledge, encoded in manuscripts, symbols, and rituals, informed political strategy, succession planning, and the safeguarding of dynasties. This knowledge was not merely theoretical. It had practical applications. Those who understood it could anticipate threats, manipulate alliances, and secure power in ways inaccessible to those relying solely on conventional authority. The preservation of sacred bloodlines was inseparable from the preservation of esoteric wisdom, together forming a dual foundation upon which history was guided and manipulated. Consider the pattern of mysterious deaths and sudden disappearances. While often attributed to disease, accidents, or political strife, the consistency of these events across centuries suggests deliberate intervention. Heirs who might threaten the stability or secrecy of lineage were quietly removed. Monarchs whose decisions could expose hidden knowledge were guided, constrained, or, in some cases, eliminated. These actions were executed with precision, leaving minimal traces in official records, yet carefully documented in secret channels. It is through the lens of secrecy that these events transform from random tragedies into strategic maneuvers designed to preserve dynastic continuity. Prophecies, often intertwined with royal lineage, further illuminate the hidden architecture of history. Texts and legends, cryptic to outsiders, guided decisions that affected generations. Knights, advisors, and secret societies acted on these prophecies, ensuring that heirs were raised, alliances forged, and lineages preserved according to an esoteric logic that was deliberately concealed. The Grail legends, for example, were not merely myths. They served as allegorical instructions for protecting sacred bloodlines and maintaining the continuity of knowledge. Each ritual, symbol, and narrative reinforced a secretive framework governing dynastic survival. Artifacts also hold critical significance in revealing concealed truths. Chalices, rings, manuscripts, and relics were not merely ceremonial. They were repositories of knowledge, coded instructions, and symbols of authority. Hidden within their designs were clues to lineage, succession, and esoteric practices. Only those trained in the secret language of these artifacts could unlock their meaning, preserving the continuity of power and wisdom across centuries. This interplay between material culture and bloodline preservation demonstrates the sophistication with which dynasties maintain control while appearing compliant with public narratives. The role of secret societies in orchestrating and concealing these truths cannot be overstated. Organizations like the Templars, Rosicrucians, and Masonic lodges acted as custodians, mentors, and enforcers of lineage continuity. They guided heirs, protected knowledge, and, when necessary, intervened in succession or politics to safeguard the integrity of the bloodline. Their influence, largely invisible to public scrutiny, created a hidden layer of governance operating parallel to and often overriding conventional historical events. These societies ensured that the ultimate truths, the preservation of sacred bloodlines and esoteric knowledge, remained intact, even when the visible structures of monarchy and politics shifted dramatically. Modern implications of this concealment are profound. Many elite families, institutions, and global networks today are descendants, in blood or influence, of those dynasties that carefully curated history. Wealth, political power, cultural authority, and social influence often trace back to these preserved bloodlines, though their origins are largely invisible to the public. Understanding this hidden continuity allows us to see modern events, political maneuvers, alliances, and power shifts, not as random or purely pragmatic, but as part of a continuum guided by centuries of strategy, secrecy, and the careful preservation of sacred authority. The ultimate revelation, then, is that history is not merely a record of events, but carefully orchestrated narrative designed to protect and preserve. Sacred bloodlines were maintained, esoteric knowledge safeguarded, and inconvenient truths erased from public memory to ensure continuity, stability, and control. The disappearance of heirs, the manipulation of succession, and the subtle guidance of rulers were not anomalies but part of a deliberate system of preservation. This system allowed dynasties to endure through revolutions, wars, and societal upheaval, creating a lineage of power that transcends conventional historical understanding. In conclusion, the secrets of royal bloodlines, hidden knowledge, and secret societies form a hidden architecture that has quietly shaped human history. The erasures, disappearances, and manipulations we see in historical records are not random. They are evidence of a deliberate effort to protect sacred continuity. The ultimate truth is that much of history, as popularly understood, conceals layers of influence, strategy, and esoteric guidance, revealing a world where blood, knowledge, and secrecy were inseparable. To uncover these truths is to see history anew, not as a linear narrative of kings and battles, but as a carefully managed continuum in which dynasties, knowledge, and influence were preserved against the forces of time, chaos, and oblivion.
As we reach the final chapter of this journey into royal bloodlines, secret knowledge, and hidden influence, it becomes clear that the story is far from simple. What we perceive as history is often only the visible layer, the surface narrative presented to the public. Beneath it lies a complex, carefully orchestrated network of dynastic preservation, esoteric wisdom, and secret guidance that has quietly shaped the course of humanity for centuries. The legacies of hidden bloodlines continue to reverberate today, reminding us that history is not merely recorded, it is curated. The preservation of sacred lineages was never accidental. Through generations, dynasties carefully maintained the integrity of bloodlines, guided by secret societies, guardians, and mentors. Marriage, succession, and education were meticulously orchestrated, ensuring that heirs inherited not only titles and wealth, but also the knowledge and wisdom deemed essential for leadership. This dual inheritance of blood and esoteric insight created a foundation upon which dynasties could endure through wars, revolutions, and societal upheavals. It also ensured that the secrets of power were not diluted or lost to time, but preserved in ways that were often invisible to the wider world. The interplay between bloodline and knowledge is particularly fascinating. While we often view power in terms of armies, politics, or wealth, history demonstrates that true continuity relies on something less tangible but equally potent: the careful transmission of wisdom, strategy, and sacred insight. Rulers guided by esoteric knowledge could anticipate threats, manipulate alliances, and preserve their lineage in ways that seem almost impossible when viewed from a conventional historical perspective. Sacred knowledge and lineage were inseparable. Each depended on the other for survival and influence. Secret societies amplified this dynamic. Organizations such as the Templars, Rosicrucians, and Freemasons were not merely philosophical or ceremonial. They acted as custodians, mentors, and enforcers of lineage preservation. Their rituals, symbols, and networks allowed dynasties to survive threats that would have otherwise toppled them. By operating in the shadows, these societies ensured continuity across generations, continents, and political regimes. Their influence demonstrates that the real power of history often lies not in public action, but in invisible guidance, carefully calibrated and deliberately concealed. Artifacts, documents, and hidden maps played equally crucial roles. Objects that appear mundane or ceremonial often contained encoded knowledge about succession, alliances, and sacred rites. Manuscripts preserved genealogical truths erased from public records, while maps indicated the location of heirs, relics, or strategic sites. Even architecture, from secret chambers to symbolic inscriptions, served as repositories of wisdom. Together, These tools ensured that the continuity of bloodlines was preserved, even when public events suggested instability or disruption. In this sense, history was meticulously safeguarded through both tangible and symbolic means. Modern implications are profound. Many influential families today carry hidden connections to these ancient lineages, and through wealth, political networks, and cultural influence, the legacy of sacred bloodlines continues to shape the world. While monarchy and aristocratic power may appear diminished, the underlying structures of influence endure. Decisions in finance, politics, and society are often guided by networks tracing back to preserved bloodlines, and the subtle strategies employed centuries ago continue to influence modern life. This continuity reminds us that history is not only what happened, but what was intentionally preserved, concealed, and transmitted across generations. The Grail legends, prophecy, and esoteric teachings reinforce the idea that history is layered and symbolic. While public narratives focus on battles, treaties, and rulers' deeds, hidden narratives of succession, guardianship, and secret wisdom provide a deeper context. Understanding these layers transforms our perception of the past, revealing a world in which myth, prophecy, and lineage are intertwined, guiding events in ways largely invisible to the casual observer. It is a world in which power is not only wielded openly but carefully protected, encoded, and transmitted through time. One of the most remarkable aspects of these hidden histories is their resilience. Dynasties survived invasions, revolutions, and societal collapse not solely through military might or political maneuvering, but through secrecy, foresight, and the disciplined preservation of knowledge. Even when rulers fell, heirs survived, sometimes in exile, protected by loyal societies and hidden guardians. This continuity ensured that the sacred bloodlines and the wisdom associated with them remained intact, quietly influencing the world for centuries. The preservation of bloodlines was thus a masterclass in patience, strategy, and secrecy, demonstrating a level of planning that defies conventional understanding of history. As we reflect on these revelations, it becomes clear that the study of hidden bloodlines is more than a historical curiosity. It is a lens through which we can reinterpret the past and understand the present. By examining genealogy, artifacts, esoteric texts, and the activities of secret societies, we gain insight into a layer of history deliberately obscured from the public eye. This hidden layer explains inconsistencies, mysterious events, and seemingly improbable successions in ways conventional narratives cannot. It is a reminder that history is never entirely what it seems, and that power, knowledge, and lineage have always been intertwined in ways both visible and invisible. Ultimately, the legacy of hidden bloodlines is a story of continuity, resilience, and subtle influence. It is a narrative that transcends time, linking ancient dynasties to modern networks of power. The past is not lost. It is preserved, encoded, and transmitted through generations, shaping societies in ways often unnoticed but deeply felt. For those willing to look beyond the surface, these hidden histories offer a profound understanding of how influence endures, how knowledge is preserved, and how sacred bloodlines quietly continue to shape our world. In conclusion, the story of hidden royal bloodlines, secret societies, and esoteric knowledge is far from a simple tale of kings and queens. It is a multi-layered narrative of secrecy, preservation, and strategic influence that stretches across centuries. From hidden manuscripts to coded symbols, secret societies to concealed heirs, history has been curated with extraordinary care to protect continuity and wisdom. As we close this journey, we are left not with final answers, but with a deeper awareness. History is alive, layered, and preserved through blood, knowledge, and secrecy. The hidden legacies of these bloodlines continue to influence our world, challenging us to reconsider what we know, what we believe, and what might still be concealed beneath the surface of recorded history. Even as we conclude this journey through centuries of secret knowledge, concealed lineages, and clandestine societies, one question remains: what do the hidden bloodlines of the past mean for the future? History, as we have discovered, is not merely a record of events. It is a carefully curated continuum, preserved through secrecy, strategy, and the transmission of wisdom. The legacy of these bloodlines extends beyond the relics, manuscripts, and secret societies we have explored. It continues to ripple through the modern world, shaping power, influence, and perhaps even the destiny of humanity itself. The hidden dynasties of the past have evolved into networks of influence that transcend borders. While monarchies may no longer rule with absolute authority, the principles of lineage, continuity, and preservation endure in modern institutions. Heirs of these sacred bloodlines often hold positions of power in politics, finance, and global organizations. Their influence is subtle yet profound, guiding decisions and alliances in ways most of the world will never perceive. In many respects, the guardianship of lineage has shifted from castles and thrones to corporations, foundations, and international networks, a modern iteration of the ancient mission to protect both blood and knowledge. Technology and information have introduced a new dimension to this hidden legacy. The digital age, with its global connectivity and instantaneous communication, has both exposed and obscured knowledge. On one hand, secret archives, genealogical records, and rare manuscripts can now be discovered, digitized, and studied in ways unimaginable in previous centuries. On the other hand, the sheer volume of information, misinformation, and distraction allows hidden bloodlines and esoteric knowledge to remain concealed in plain sight. Modern heirs and custodians now operate in a world where secrecy must adapt to new technologies, continuing centuries-old strategies under a radically different landscape. Prophecy, symbolism, and ritual, the tools of the past, continue to play a role, even subtly, in the present. Ancient texts, alchemical symbols, and genealogical codes are studied not only for historical insight, but for understanding how continuity and influence were maintained. Modern heirs may consult historians, archivists, or even esoteric advisors to decode ancestral wisdom, ensuring that the principles of preservation, responsibility, and stewardship endure. This creates a fascinating intersection of the old and the new, where ancient strategies meet contemporary tools and global networks, continuing the work of centuries-long guardianship. One of the most intriguing implications for the future is the potential rediscovery of secrets long thought lost. Manuscripts, artifacts, and hidden records continue to emerge from private collections, archives, and forgotten libraries. Each discovery has the potential to reshape our understanding of history, revealing previously concealed alliances, heirs, and knowledge. As new evidence comes to light, the narratives of power, influence, and bloodline continuity will continue to evolve. History is not static. It is a living, breathing continuum that adapts and reveals itself gradually, layer by layer, to those willing to investigate and interpret its hidden patterns. The ethical dimension of this hidden legacy cannot be overlooked. Guardianship of bloodlines has always carried responsibility, not only for preserving power, but for safeguarding knowledge and ensuring it is used wisely. History is filled with examples of knowledge misused or exploited for selfish ends, leading to conflict, upheaval, and suffering. Modern heirs, societies, and custodians face similar challenges. How to honor the legacy of continuity, maintain secrecy, and exercise influence responsibly in a world that is increasingly interconnected and transparent. The lessons of history emphasize that lineage and wisdom are inseparable, and both must be stewarded with care, foresight, and moral integrity. Global events, politics, and cultural shifts will continue to be influenced, at least in part, by these hidden networks of blood and knowledge. While public discourse often focuses on elected leaders, revolutions, and policy decisions, the undercurrents of lineage, strategy, and esoteric continuity quietly shape outcomes. Awareness of these dynamics allows us to interpret the modern world differently, recognizing that some forces operate beyond conventional visibility. The past informs the present not just through recorded events, but through invisible threads of influence, guidance, and preserved wisdom that continue to act today. Ultimately, the hidden bloodlines of history serve as a reminder that power, knowledge, and legacy are inseparable. The careful preservation of lineage, the safeguarding of esoteric wisdom, and the guidance of secret societies ensured that dynasties endured through centuries of turmoil. Today, the same principles continue to operate, though their manifestations may be subtler, often disguised within global institutions, elite networks, and cultural influence. The hidden threads of the past are still active, quietly shaping the future, reminding us that history is never fully visible and that the continuity of blood and knowledge remains a force to be reckoned with. For those who seek understanding, the lesson is both cautionary and inspiring. Hidden bloodlines reveal that the world is rarely as simple as it appears. Power is not only exercised openly, but carefully preserved through secrecy, wisdom, and strategy. Knowledge is a tool, a responsibility, and a legacy often intertwined with the very families and institutions that have shaped human history. By studying these hidden patterns, we gain insight not only into the past, but into the principles that may govern the future. The enduring importance of lineage, guidance, and the careful stewardship of knowledge across generations. In conclusion, the story of hidden royal bloodlines is far from complete. The past has left a legacy encoded in manuscripts, maps, rituals, and artifacts, preserved by secret societies and careful guardians, and passed down through generations. Yet the story continues, unfolding in the modern world, where heirs, networks, and hidden knowledge operate in ways both visible and invisible. The legacy of hidden bloodlines challenges us to reconsider history, recognize the depth of influence beyond public perception, and remain aware that the threads of continuity, secrecy, and wisdom are still very much alive. The past, in this sense, is not behind us. It is a living framework guiding the present and shaping the future. Even as we conclude this journey through centuries of secret knowledge, concealed lineages, and clandestine societies, one question remains: what do the hidden bloodlines of the past mean for the future? History, as we have discovered, is not merely a record of events. It is a carefully curated continuum, preserved through secrecy, strategy, and the transmission of wisdom. The legacy of these bloodlines extends beyond the relics, manuscripts, and secret societies we have explored. It continues to ripple through the modern world, shaping power, influence, and perhaps even the destiny of humanity itself. The hidden dynasties of the past have evolved into networks of influence that transcend borders. While monarchies may no longer rule with absolute authority, the principles of lineage, continuity, and preservation endure in modern institutions. Heirs of these sacred bloodlines often hold positions of power in politics, finance, and global organizations. Their influence is subtle yet profound, guiding decisions and alliances in ways most of the world will never perceive. In many respects, the guardianship of lineage has shifted from castles and thrones to corporations, foundations, and international networks, a modern iteration of the ancient mission to protect both blood and knowledge. Technology and information have introduced a new dimension to this hidden legacy. The digital age, with its global connectivity and instantaneous communication, has both exposed and obscured knowledge. On one hand, secret archives, genealogical records, and rare manuscripts can now be discovered, digitized, and studied in ways unimaginable in previous centuries. On the other hand, the sheer volume of information, misinformation, and distraction allows hidden bloodlines and esoteric knowledge to remain concealed in plain sight. Modern heirs and custodians now operate in a world where secrecy must adapt to new technologies, continuing centuries-old strategies under a radically different landscape. Prophecy, symbolism, and ritual, the tools of the past, continue to play a role, even subtly, in the present. Ancient texts, alchemical symbols, and genealogical codes are studied not only for historical insight, but for understanding how continuity and influence were maintained. Modern heirs may consult historians, archivists, or even esoteric advisors to decode ancestral wisdom, ensuring that the principles of preservation, responsibility, and stewardship endure. This creates a fascinating intersection of the old and the new, where ancient strategies meet contemporary tools and global networks, continuing the work of centuries-long guardianship. One of the most intriguing implications for the future is the potential rediscovery of secrets long thought lost. Manuscripts, artifacts, and hidden records continue to emerge from private collections, archives, and forgotten libraries. Each discovery has the potential to reshape our understanding of history, revealing previously concealed alliances, heirs, and knowledge. As new evidence comes to light, the narratives of power, influence, and bloodline continuity will continue to evolve. History is not static. It is a living, breathing continuum that adapts and reveals itself gradually, layer by layer, to those willing to investigate and interpret its hidden patterns. The ethical dimension of this hidden legacy cannot be overlooked. Guardianship of bloodlines has always carried responsibility, not only for preserving power, but for safeguarding knowledge and ensuring it is used wisely. History is filled with examples of knowledge misused or exploited for selfish ends, leading to conflict, upheaval, and suffering. Modern heirs, societies, and custodians face similar challenges. How to honor the legacy of continuity, maintain secrecy, and exercise influence responsibly in a world that is increasingly interconnected and transparent. The lessons of history emphasize that lineage and wisdom are inseparable, and both must be stewarded with care, foresight, and moral integrity. Global events, politics, and cultural shifts will continue to be influenced, at least in part, by these hidden networks of blood and knowledge. While public discourse often focuses on elected leaders, revolutions, and policy decisions, the undercurrents of lineage, strategy, and esoteric continuity quietly shape outcomes. Awareness of these dynamics allows us to interpret the modern world differently, recognizing that some forces operate beyond conventional visibility. The past informs the present not just through recorded events, but through invisible threads of influence, guidance, and preserved wisdom that continue to act today. Ultimately, the hidden bloodlines of history serve as a reminder that power, knowledge, and legacy are inseparable. The careful preservation of lineage, the safeguarding of esoteric wisdom, and the guidance of secret societies ensured that dynasties endured through centuries of turmoil. Today, the same principles continue to operate, though their manifestations may be subtler, often disguised within global institutions, elite networks, and cultural influence. The hidden threads of the past are still active, quietly shaping the future, reminding us that history is never fully visible and that the continuity of blood and knowledge remains a force to be reckoned with. For those who seek understanding, the lesson is both cautionary and inspiring. Hidden bloodlines reveal that the world is rarely as simple as it appears. Power is not only exercised openly, but carefully preserved through secrecy, wisdom, and strategy. Knowledge is a tool, a responsibility, and a legacy often intertwined with the very families and institutions that have shaped human history. By studying these hidden patterns, we gain insight not only into the past, but into the principles that may govern the future. The enduring importance of lineage, guidance, and the careful stewardship of knowledge across generations. In conclusion, the story of hidden royal bloodlines is far from complete. The past has left a legacy encoded in manuscripts, maps, rituals, and artifacts, preserved by secret societies and careful guardians, and passed down through generations. Yet the story continues, unfolding in the modern world, where heirs, networks, and hidden knowledge operate in ways both visible and invisible. The legacy of hidden bloodlines challenges us to reconsider history, Recognize the depth of influence beyond public perception, and remain aware that the threads of continuity, secrecy, and wisdom are still very much alive. The past, in this sense, is not behind us. It is a living framework guiding the present and shaping the future.